90% of the Cowboys draft coverage that you can see out there is all assuming that the Cowboys will be taking an offensive lineman in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft. So tonight, I just want to answer the question, what if they don't? Let's get to it. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Prime Time. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on Dallas On Demand Sports Talk Network with a lot more content coming your way. Make sure that you check out atozsports.com/Dallas. And as always, do me a favor and hit the like button for me if you enjoy the show. Welcome, everyone, on a Tuesday night. It is a great night to talk some Cowboys football. And tonight, we're going to be discussing some draft for the Cowboys, first-round draft content, but with a twist. What if they don't take an offensive lineman? Who are the prospects that they could be looking at if they decide to surprise us with a different route? Now, you might be thinking, Mo, there's no way they don't pick a tackle. There's no way they don't pick a guard, a center, or whichever fits best in terms of the value at the board at that time, because it is a way they can improve in 2024. They're not making big moves in free agency. They're not making any trades. At least it doesn't seem like they are. If they're going to get an offensive lineman to really be a plug-and-play starter, they got to do it in the first round of the draft, or just hope for Chuma Edoga or somebody to step up. TJ Bass, Brock Hoffman, more likely the latter two instead of Chuma, if we're being real. But I still think that although I would predict the Cowboys to take a lineman in the first round of the NFL draft, I still think we shouldn't dismiss the possibility of the Cowboys going a different route. So what does that look like? We'll get into 5 prospects tonight that I could see the Cowboys targeting in the first round of the draft. But before I dive into the names, let me say hi very quickly. We've got a lot of people here in the show right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Shout out to Gregory. We've got Katharina. Who else do we have around here? We've got Daniel and Gregory and Stephen White. Shout out to everybody who is joining the show right now. Thank you so much for tuning into Primetime and taking time out of your day to listen to the show. Also, Jeff over on Facebook. Shout out to everybody, man. So let's get to it. Let's get to the first name, right? And this might not be ideal because I'm putting Brian Thomas Jr. on the thumbnail. I'm putting him on the graphic right now, but I'm still not going to start with him. You'll see why in a moment. I'm going to start with a defensive pick that I believe the Cowboys could seriously be looking into ahead of the NFL draft. In fact, scratch that. We know they're looking into him because he's actually a top 30 visit. I'm talking about Darius Robinson from Missouri. Now, we could talk about whether or not defensive end / edge rusher is a need for the Cowboys. And the answer is going to be yes, mostly in terms of depth. The Cowboys have got their starters. They've got Micah. They've got D-Law. But let's leave that aside for a moment and let's focus on this. What makes Darius Robinson a potential first-round pick, because he's right in that borderline, like if he's not going late in the first in many mocks, he's going early in the second. What makes him that kind of prospect is the kind of stuff that the Cowboys like. So what you see on the screen right now, for those of you watching on YouTube and Facebook, you can see James Foster's from A to Z Sports, his scouting notes on the strengths of Darius Robinson. And what will you see there? You're talking about somebody with a dream built for a defensive end, with elite size, length, and frame. In otherwise, man, the upside is right there. And you know that the Cowboys will never shy away from taking a guy that might not be a finished product, but that has that immediate upside to bet on for the future. Moving on, he also has flexibility. Boy, oh boy, we're speaking Stephen Jones language right here. He's a converted defensive tackle. He only played 1 year on the edge for Missouri and killed it. And he's somebody that just offers that positional versatility along the defensive line. And you know the Cowboys like that. Now, there's many other things to talk about with Darius Robinson. He's great with the bull rush. He has quite pass rush repertoire, which is always fun to see in rookies that are coming into the NFL. You're not worried about them having to learn stuff in the first offseason when you might think they have a lot of time, but they really don't because there's a lot more that they need to learn and the time is very limited. Darius Robinson, per the consensus board, is the 34th best overall prospect. According to James Foster, he's the 29th best. And just to give you an idea, he has him as a better prospect than Penn State's Chop Robinson, who per the consensus is better. We're talking about somebody with an 84th percentile arm length, over 34 inches long, 95th percentile wingspan. He's 6'5". I could totally see the Cowboys going for Darius Robinson at 24th overall. I'm going to be honest with you. And here's the thing. It seems to me, based on what the consensus and many scouts and draft analysts that I respect so much seem to agree that from Darius Robinson to the next edge rusher, you're talking about a steep drop-off. So to give you an idea, Darius Robinson ranks 34th in the consensus board. The next edge rusher ranks outside of the top 50. So there's a drop-off right there. So it might be a situation where Isidro here makes a great point where he says maybe trading down. I could see the Cowboys targeting Darius Robinson if they do trade down and he's still there on the board for sure. And I will say this. I think the Cowboys are candidates to trade down. I usually, every single year, make the argument that every team, and this is true, this is still true, like every NFL fan base talks about trading down every single year. And every single fan base talks about how it would be the smartest thing that they could do because they could earn more draft picks. But the thing is that you can work the phones and all, but sometimes the value is just not going to be there because there are so many teams wanting to trade down in the first place. So, hey, there you go. I'm just saying, Darius Robinson, top 30 visit. The Cowboys could use defensive end. And I'm going to tell you something right now. DeMarcus Lawrence is on the quietest contract year ever. And I might be exaggerating there a little bit, but all this talk about Micah, CD, Dak negotiating their deals, all this talk about what the Cowboys have done in free agency and this and that and the other, kind of has made us forget about the fact that D-Law is on his way to free agency in 2025. So you definitely could use some defensive end help. And you might not get a better shot at it other than Darius Robinson at 24th overall. We've got a lot of good comments here. Gregory says, so just for clarification, don't you consider an edge rusher a lineman? Says Gregory. Nah, yeah, for sure. But I always kind of do like interior defensive lineman and edge rusher. So sorry about that if I got that mixed up. So edge rusher, defensive end / outside linebacker, the guy that is going after the quarterback or just playing contain on the run game or that sort of stuff. That's my edge rusher. So Micah and D-Law, and then interior defensive lineman, Osa, Massey, and all of them. So yeah, just to clarify that. Sorry if I messed that one up. Cam says trading down is where to go. And yeah, like if you can get that 4th round draft pick back, I can guarantee you the Cowboys are going to look into that possibility. I'm not going to be surprised if they do, but we'll see. Now, let's see here. Puffy says D-Law must be. Hey, man, what? Why are we accusing players of taking substances out of nowhere? Andre says that's good. He knows he needs to make plays. I think he's talking about Mr. Darius Robinson right there. Shout out to Jason and Ines and a lot of people over on the Facebook chat and the YouTube chat, Gilbert as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Now, let's move on to the next prospect, though, that we have on this list. 5 non-offensive linemen the Cowboys could take in the first round. And I've got a group of 3 players. Now, you might already be guessing why these are bundled together into 3. But I think the Cowboys could take a wide receiver in the first round. And I think you would be looking at 3 specific targets if they do go down that route. Now, interestingly enough, the Cowboys have not had a top 30 visit with a wide receiver, at least not according per the reports that have gone out so far. We don't have 30 names yet, so they might end up meeting with one of these guys. So there might be some insight there. But for now, they're not a top 30 visit. But you do have 3 players that the Cowboys formally met with at the NFL Scouting Combine. Now, you could go with Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, Adonai Mitchell from the Texas Longhorns, and Xavier Worthy also from the Texas Longhorns. This is a situation that might have 2 significant variables. One, are they available when the Cowboys go on the clock at 24th overall? Or 2, who do you like better? Who do you like best? Which style do you like the most? Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky because both Thomas and Adonai Mitchell, the way that I see it, are more similar to each other than Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy is on a different kind of group here because he's damn good, and we've all seen him in the big stage. Xavier Worthy will make plays, but the size is always a problem, right? He's sub 6 foot. He's a guy that would be one of the smallest wide receivers to ever play in the NFL, but he also ran a 4.21 40. So the balancing part of it is very, very hard to get right because he's going to be an absolute vertical threat that defenses are going to hate going up against just because he's going to dictate coverage in all of these different ways. But he's also going to struggle blocking. Like, there's no question he's going to struggle blocking. I don't think there's a question that he's going to struggle versus press coverage if they go rough with him at the line of scrimmage. He's got a fluid change of direction. Like, he's not a guy that will just go vertical and hope for the best. No, he can run routes. He can change directions. But he also doesn't have a catch radius that will make you go crazy for him. He's limited in that aspect because he's small. So Xavier Worthy is kind of like somebody that you got to be willing to take that risk. And I kind of have some questions about whether or not the Cowboys would take that risk at 24th overall. So I will say out of these 3, Xavier Worthy would be the guy that would surprise me the most. Now, if we get to Adonai Mitchell, he's somebody that multiple analysts, including James Foster from A-to-Z Sports, including Brett Coleman, who does a fantastic job breaking down football here on YouTube, both have compared him to CeeDee Lamb. And there are more people out there comparing Adonai Mitchell to CeeDee Lamb. Now, I can see why. And the way that James Foster puts it is one of the best ways to put it, in my opinion. Mitchell has the size, speed, and fluidity that you cannot teach. You can get a lot of wide receivers in Dallas, and you can teach them how to run routes, how to do this, how to do that. But that size, speed, fluidity combination that Mitchell brings to the table is special. He's got elite body control. He looks like a complete receiver. The problem that many have pointed out is, well, why didn't he produce when he was at Texas? Because he didn't put up crazy numbers like CeeDee did back when he was in Oklahoma, when he was putting out otherworldly, jaw-dropping yards after the catch. Adonai Mitchell was not really doing any of that. And I've seen some concerns in James Foster, one of his notes over on the big board for A-to-Z Sports, is that most of his production came in double move routes. So does that relate to the fact that he mostly faced off coverage when he was at the Big 12? And that separation was there, but maybe not through being physical. So Adonai Mitchell not really known for being very physical, which might contribute to the lack of production beyond double moves, right? And lack of production in yards after the catch. But still, Adonai Mitchell has the traits, he has the tools to become a superstar in the NFL. So do the Cowboys let that opportunity slip through their fingertips? We'll see. Now, the other one, and I left him until the end because he might be the unlikeliest of them all to reach the 24th overall pick. That is Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas is 6'4". He's got insane arm length. He went out there in 2023 and scored 17 receiving touchdowns. Hadn't been done since 2020. Led the FBS in scoring touchdowns. He has a diverse release. He can block. He's great at the line of scrimmage. Ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. And he comes from a basketball background that Dane Brugler has talked a lot about, that really shows up on tape, where you can see him make plays above the rim. You can see him take that to football as well. All I'm saying here is, like, you kind of have your flavors to pick here from wide receivers. And I would say that if one of these two is available, the Cowboys are at least going to consider them. Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell. And as I said, I would be a little bit more surprised about Xavier Worthy. But if I had to rank, which is the likeliest position that the Cowboys are going to draft in the first round of the NFL draft, I would obviously go offensive line first, whether that's a tackle or an interior guy. At number 2, I'm jotting down wide receiver. And I just talked about Darius Robinson and all that. But since there are likely going to be 3 of these guys that are available, or at least possibly, not likely, possibly, man, I'm going with a wide receiver, because I also think it's kind of like a need for the Cowboys, even though they've got CD and they've got Brandon Cooks and all that. Now, on a similar note, this kind of brings up the question, what are the Cowboys thinking? Because they told us they were going to go all in, and obviously they're not going all in. But now we're kind of wondering, well, but how are they approaching the NFL draft? Are they approaching it like they seem to be approaching free agency and contract negotiations, like building for the future? Or are we looking for plug-and-play players that can change the way that this team looks right away? Because that might impact your decision-making between an offensive lineman that you might need to develop versus a wide receiver that you believe can walk in here and be a better number 2 wide receiver than what Brandon Cooks is, or a better wide receiver 3 than what Jalen Tolbert is. That kind of changes your perspective at the moment of making the pick, because it's suddenly not just about who is the best player available. It's about who can be maybe more of an impact maker in 2024 if you're going the all-in route, which they're likely not going to be doing based on the rest of their decisions so far this offseason. But still, food for thought right there, in my opinion. Andre says, Brian Thomas, the Cowboys need to get him. And I know Brian has some fans. I know, and it's easy to understand why when you put his film up and watch some LSU football right there. Bob here says, I think that for the Jones boys to take a receiver at 24, they would have to be superior to an offensive lineman. And hey, I agree with Bob. I think that if they go wide receiver, and it's always very difficult to like guess what a draft board looks like for any other team. But like, I'm just gonna make stuff up, all right? So JPJ is off the board, and then maybe Troy Fautano is also off the board, and Graham Barton is off the board. Could the Cowboys maybe be like, man, I would rather just have Adonai Mitchell than Kingsley from BYU? And I struggled with his last name, so I'm not gonna make a poor attempt at it. But maybe for next show, I'll be ready to go. I just haven't talked about him that much. So how lower would the offensive lineman need to be ranked for the Cowboys to go get a wide receiver? And it also depends on which wide receiver is available, right? So I agree with Bob right there. Shout out to Cam. Maybe it might be. No, I'm not. Don't worry. Mark Aaron says, I like this wide receiver class. It extends to like the 5th round, says Mark. And we know the Cowboys like Corley from Western Kentucky. We know a lot of players the Cowboys could take in day 2. But it's going to be more or less the same conversation where you're going into day 2 thinking of a linebacker, you're thinking of a running back, you're thinking of a defensive tackle, a defensive end, provided you don't take one in the first round. So at the end of the day, this is a team that has many more holes than what you would expect out of a team that has won 12 games in 3 consecutive seasons. But anyway, so 5 non-offensive linemen that the Cowboys could take in the first round. We've talked about Darius Robinson. We've talked about 3 wide receivers in Brian Thomas, Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy. We've got one more player to get to, and this is by far the unlikeliest one to fall to them in the NFL draft. Because just looking at grinding the mocks, out of the players that we've talked about, they are very realistic targets. Brian Thomas is predicted to go 21st overall. That is right in the Cowboys range. Adonai Mitchell is predicted to go in the 32nd overall pick. Easy pick. Darius Robinson, 35th, and Xavier Worthy, 36th. So we're talking about very realistic targets here for the Cowboys. The only guy on this list that is not outside of the top 20 for grinding the mocks, which is a website that tries to predict the order of the NFL draft, is Byron Murphy. Now, Byron Murphy, defensive tackle out of Texas, one of the few first-round targets, very few first-round targets that the Cowboys have hosted on a top 30 visit. They've hosted offensive linemen like Powers Johnson. They've gotten Troy Fautanu on the building. They've got a lot of those guys. Graham Barton, and I'm kind of forgetting who the other one is, but it's 4 offensive linemen. Fuaga is the one that I was missing. And then outside of them, they've gotten Byron Murphy, basically, and Darius Robinson. Robinson might not make it to the Cowboys pick, but if he does, it will be interesting to see if they take him or not, because he's an interior defensive lineman that would probably play 3-tech for you. And you already have Osa Odigizua in the building, who has played very well. I know there's been some concerns about Osa late in the season, but at the end of the day, I do think Osa has been pretty good and is one of your strong points going into 2024. But Byron Murphy, if you take him, it's because he's too good to pass on. He's an elite athlete, according to James Foster, with an explosive first step with lateral quickness to tread in both gaps. So even though he plays 3-tech, he could play both gaps for you. He led defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen, that is, in 2023 in terms of pass rush win rate. He is an explosive athlete. However, I'll say this, he is a little bit undersized, and that might be a problem for Byron Murphy, a problem enough to maybe drop to 24th overall, you know? So he's got a 22nd percentile arm length. He has 2nd percentile height for a defensive tackle, so that might be an issue for him. However, every analyst seems to agree that all those size concerns go out the window as soon as you put on the film, because you're watching an explosive athlete at work. You're watching somebody that wins reps immediately. The problem that James Foster does note that I found interesting is that he struggles with double teams. And that might be because of the size as well. He goes to the ground very often as a run defender, and he might struggle with that in the NFL. So we'll see what happens. But other than that, man, Byron Murphy, considered a top 20 prospect. If he falls to 24th, he's a Texas Longhorn and all that, he might end up going to the Cowboys. I wouldn't dismiss that possibility. So just to recap, Darius Robinson, one of these 3 wide receivers, Thomas, Mitchell, Worthy, Byron Murphy, are my 5 non-offensive linemen that I believe the Cowboys could take in the first round of the NFL draft. I would still predict them to take offensive line. I think that is the likeliest pick by a wide margin. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, it's offensive line no matter what. I think the Cowboys would go a different route if they really want to do it. I don't think they're going to – I think they would be willing. This is a good way to put it. They would be willing to put on – to take on the risk of not having that ideal starting 5 offensive linemen if it means getting somebody that is higher on their board, like one of the guys that we just talked about. I do think they would do that. Isidro says, we need 3 starters from this draft. And I recently saw, I think it was from ESPN or NFL.com. I cannot quite remember. It might have been somewhere else. It was an article on 5 teams that needed to ace their draft picks, first-round draft picks. And I cannot remember the teams that were on there, but the Cowboys were not under. And I was like, that's interesting. Because I absolutely think the Cowboys need to ace their round 1 pick because they need a starter at least, like Isidro says. Cam says they need a center too. Jackson Powers Johnson perhaps in the 24th pick. I would like that. And it feels like everyone is on the same page with this because Gregory is saying first round pick has to be legit. I cannot afford to pick a Band-Aid. That is true. It's absolutely true. We got Sean here who says, almost don't care what wide receiver is available. If we cannot get a premier offensive lineman, then get a premium linebacker. No matter what, says Sean, draft best available player after that for all I care. That's interesting. I get the lineman part. I do think 24th, if you go linebacker, you probably will be reaching for a linebacker at the first round. The way that this draft class is built, it's going to be a struggle to get linebacker in the first. I can guarantee you a lot of people won't be happy if that ends up happening. But I agree with Sean in just the overall sentiment of, man, they likely got to get a lineman. Now, Sean, I might have misread this, though, now that I think about it. He might have mean O-line in the first, and then linebacker in the second, and then do the rest. BPA. And that is a plan that I would call the likeliest plan for the Cowboys, honestly. Lineman, linebacker, and then best player available with a running back, preferably in the third. Marco says, I think defensive line is a huge need. It's absolutely underrated. Like, you don't have a nose tackle other than Massey Smith, and otherwise, in other words, you don't have a healthy nose tackle because Massey is not healthy right now. He will be by training camp. Not healthy right now, though. You've got Osa as a 3 tech, little depth behind him. And then edge rusher, it's Sam Williams behind Micah and Dila. And then it's Viliame Fehoko. So I agree with Marco. I think defensive line, both edge rushers and interior guys, are an underrated need going into the NFL draft. But ladies and gentlemen, that will be it for me tonight here on the show. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do me a favor and hit the like button for me. And I'll see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central. Next week, we will have some announcements about the way that Primetime will continue to go out. But in the meantime, I'll see you tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Central, and then on Thursday night as well. But next week, we're going to be doing a different setup. We will do live shows still, but it might not be 5 nights a week. We might tone that down a little bit and then mix in some pre-recorded videos of the Cowboys here on A to Z Sports Dallas. You will still be getting 5 pieces of content from me. It just might not be 5 nightly live shows, if that makes sense. I'll talk to you more about it later in the week. In the meantime, though, have a great rest of your Tuesday night, and I'll see you tomorrow, 8 p.m. Bye-bye.